Welcome to the SaleAway podcast. My name is Trey. I am the co-founder and broker at SaleAway, and I'm joined with Jake and Zach, who are both co-founders and brokers as well. At SaleAway, we make buying and selling online businesses a breeze. Whether you're a current online business owner or aspire to be an online business owner, this is the podcast for you. If you missed episode 1 or 2 of the 10-part series, How to Sell an Online Business, go back and listen to them. Come back to this one. The first 2 episodes are very crucial to anyone who is trying to sell their online business. In this series, we are going in order of selling your business. So it is very important to follow step by step. Once you've decided it's time to sell your online business and prepared your financials, the next most important decision is determining where to sell your business. How and where you choose to sell your business can have a huge impact on the sale price and time to close. Today, we are going to discuss the best way to sell your business to maximize the amount of money you put in your pocket.
All right, so there are 2 viable choices for selling your website. Those 2 options would be using an online business broker like SaleAway. And additionally, you could list it on the online marketplace. That would be places like Flippa. Shopify also has a platform to list any of their Shopify businesses on. And so touching on that online business broker, it is essentially equivalent to hiring a real estate agent to sell your house. The broker is hands-off, will essentially gather, ask a lot of questions, gather a lot of data, get all the financials up front. And from there, they should put together kind of an information packet, put together a lot of information about the business. So it is hands-on from the seller's perspective to start off with answering questions, helping the broker obtain all of the information and knowledge they need, at which point they'll put together all of the materials, and then they should have a deep list or a holistic list of potential buyers that they can tap into to help sell your website. Marketplace, like we touched on, Flippa, Shopify, essentially what you could do is simply post your business online, wait for people to reach out to you. It's kind of equivalent to for sale by owner. So essentially you're just putting all the information online on one of those websites, marketplaces, and just waiting for people to reach out to you.
So next, we're going to go ahead and dive into 7 specific things to consider before you decide if you're going to list your business with a marketplace or with an online broker. But before we go into that, Zach, I wanted to ask a question or maybe have you touch a little bit on the difference between a traditional business broker and an online business broker.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. I think it's a great point to cover quickly here. And so going off that, traditional business broker typically or frequently sell brick and mortar businesses. Again, these are retail businesses that typically have a physical location. Their buyer base are typically people looking for those retail businesses. So again, very localized. I live in Denver, so using that as an example, typically these would be, if you found a traditional business broker in Denver, these would be people selling retail or physical businesses in the greater Denver area or somewhere in Colorado, most likely. So they don't always understand online business models, don't understand how to sell them, where to find potential buyers, and aren't really familiar with transferring digital assets and a lot of the other things that go along with online businesses.
Great. Yeah, that's super helpful. And so I think the clear distinction that we want to make is when we speak generally about brokers here, we're speaking about online business brokers, which are specialized for online and digital assets. And we recommend, if you go the broker route, absolutely using an online broker rather than a traditional business broker for those reasons that Zach mentioned. So diving into our 7 considerations, the first thing we want to touch on is the size of your business. Depending on the size of your business, it could make sense to go either way. Our kind of golden rule of thumb is that if your business is worth more than $100,000, you should absolutely always use a brokerage. And the reason being is transactions that get up into the 6-figure price range are just inherently more complicated than smaller, say $10,000 or $20,000 transactions. On a 20K business deal, you can probably get away with having a very simplified purchase agreement. It's probably a smaller business where it's pretty simple to transfer all of the assets. But once you get to 100K plus, you're going to start seeing a lot more creative financing structures such as seller financing and earnouts. And there's going to be a lot more legal documentation, or the legal documentation is going to be a lot more serious. It needs to be a lot more buttoned up. And so just in general, if it's over 100,000, we absolutely recommend a broker because you get the additional help that you need with some of these kind of finer touch points that you need on the legal documentation and diligence side of things. And then additionally, brokers tend to have a bigger and better buyer base for sites that are in the 6-figure, 7-figure range, and we'll touch more on that point later. At sub 100K, you really have the option to go broker or marketplace. I would say even at 50K, you probably want to use a broker, but there are certain circumstances where it might be easier to use a marketplace, or to where it's more efficient to use a marketplace to get the lower fee percentage. But that's really kind of up to you. That's your call at the sub 100K price point. And I think it depends on how comfortable you are listing the business, yourself, and being able to get through the full kind of diligence, documentation, and legal side, by yourself. So next we'll go ahead and transition over to Trey, who will talk a little bit about our second consideration, which is the amount of time and effort that it takes to sell your online business.
Yeah, absolutely. So a marketplace takes a fee for connecting you with a buyer, not for helping you communicate with buyers, negotiate offers, prepare legal documents, or transfer website assets. With a marketplace, you really are all on your own, which requires a ton of time. A brokerage like SaleAway takes a load of work off of your plate by preparing professional investment materials, which we'll dive more into in episode 4 of this series, handling the signing of NDAs, which, if you're not familiar with an NDA is a non-disclosure agreement that is a legal contract between at least two parties that outlines confidential material, knowledge, or information that the parties wish to share with one another for certain purposes, but wish to restrict access to by third parties. Some businesses that we have sold, we have seen up to 100 or more NDAs signed. So really just filtering through those takes a lot of time in itself. Another thing is communicating with buyers on questions, phone calls, information, requests, negotiations. Now, this requires a lot of energy as far as a broker. On average, we would say it takes probably 30 to 40 hours in a deal of just going back and forth with potential buyers, going back and forth with buyers that have been more serious, so doing a lot more due diligence with those buyers, and then also closing of the sale. So another thing that we do is we help you guide through those legal documents. These could be LOIs, which is a letter of intent or a non-binding document outlining the understanding between two or more parties which they intend to formalize in a legal binding document. Essentially letting a seller know that a buyer is interested in purchasing their business if everything lines up in that due diligence process. These could also include purchase agreements, which is a binding document between the buyer and the seller laying out the sale of the business. Things that could be included in a purchase agreement could be the purchase price, assets being transferred, post-sale support, representation and warranties. The list can go on, and it really just gets a little bit muddy. And that's why we recommend you coming to us to really just sell your business, or if you're looking to buy a business, that way we can go through those with you, ensuring that you're not getting hurt in the long run from these purchase agreements. Another thing that we can do also is just assisting in those transferring of assets. Like Zach said, essentially traditional marketplaces or traditional brokers, they aren't very experienced in transferring digital assets. And that's something that we do specialize in, obviously, because we are an online brokerage firm. And so typically that's what we will help you with whenever it does come to that closing time. So all in all, on average, from the start of a sale to closing and signing those final documents, we would say we spend up to 100 to 150 hours on average. So a brokerage like us saves a ton of time and helps you dot your I's and cross your T's if you are unfamiliar with the process of selling a website.
Hey, Trey, great points there, and I think you covered that pretty in depth there. I did just want to point one thing out and just kind of use an example here. And let's say I'm unfamiliar with selling a website, but I think I'm a pretty smart guy. I can figure it out myself. What things do I need to learn or consider, take into account to see if I can actually figure it out myself?
Yeah, that's a great question, Zach. There's a lot more going into the back end of selling a website than what people would think. And I would probably estimate that probably 30% of our client base really think that they can take this on by themselves. We're not saying that's, don't do it. We're saying it is possible to go through us and really get a lot of workload off of your hands. So most important thing to note here is, do you have enough time to manage the whole process? So some of these are more in detail. So do you understand financing structures such as earnouts, seller financing, or SBA loans? Are you familiar with what legal documents need to be signed to effectuate a legal business transfer? Do you have a lawyer? And if not, do you understand legal jargon? Do you know how to transfer every business asset, including payment accounts, trademarks, etc.? Are you able to set up an escrow transaction to safely transfer the money?
Before we move on to the next point, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and just say one quick thing about escrow, since you went ahead and brought that up, Trey. We absolutely recommend having escrow in every single transaction that you do. If you're a business seller and you're selling your business and you're going to go ahead and transfer the business assets over to the buyer before he gives you his money, there is extremely high risk that that buyer takes your assets, runs away, and never gives you the money. So you need an escrow account, and that's a place where the buyer is going to put his money. It's a third-party account, so he's going to wire his money to this escrow account. It's going to sit in an escrow account, and then it's going to be transferred to you from the escrow agent after you have given all of the assets to the new buyer. And one of the things I wanted to bring up here is it's not extremely easy to set up an escrow transaction. You have to have a third-party middleman to act as the escrow agent, and the escrow agent is responsible for being the one to actually release the money once all of the assets have been transferred over. So it's extremely important to have a legitimate kind of middleman, or else you can really get screwed if the buyer says, hey, I have a buddy who can set the escrow transaction up for us. Well, he can go ahead and have his buddy set up the escrow, and then once he gets all of the assets, his buddy, who's the escrow agent, just denies or cancels the transaction and gets the money sent back. And so you want a third party doing escrow, and so it's one thing you absolutely want to look into a little bit further if you're going to go ahead and try to sell your business yourself.
Hey, Jake, thanks for giving that in-depth explanation about the escrow there. Definitely some scary stuff with the potential of being scammed, and something to consider that's definitely very important. And now we're going to kind of jump around and discuss a few other important points here, starting with potential buyer bases of marketplaces versus brokerage. So first off, marketplaces do have a huge member base typically, but it is dependent on the number of members that are actually coming across your listing on that on that marketplace. And typically there are thousands of listings, so there may be a little gap of buyers that maybe would be interested but just haven't found your business on there. Additionally, buyers are not vetted, so there's no way of knowing if they're illegitimate, just kind of tire kickers, just fishing for additional information, not serious about making an offer, or knowing if they are legitimate buyers. So you may waste a little time there dealing with some of those kind of tire kickers. Moving on to brokers, they do have typically deep buyer lists of vetted six-figure buyers, and have personal relationships with many of those potential buyers. So that helps out a lot with helping the transaction move quickly and smoothly. And additionally, brokers do tend to have broker accounts on all of the marketplaces where they can list your business as well. So that kind of taps into that marketplace a little bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly helps them, expand their buyer base by, tapping into the same potential buyers that you would if you were selling the business by yourself through a marketplace. You did bring up one thing that I wanted to dive into a little bit more, and that's with some of these tire kickers or illegitimate buyers. If I'm going to sell my business myself, what can I do to sort of mitigate running into these people who are wasting my time, who aren't legitimate, maybe who are trying to steal my business idea and replicate it? What can I do just to minimize the amount of people that I run into that are trying to take my ideas and take my business or waste my time?
Great question, and I think we kind of touched on this briefly before with the NDAs or the non-disclosure agreements. So it would definitely be a good idea to at least start with requiring that NDA. That will scare a lot of people away if they are just those tire kickers that I kind of touched on briefly. That will scare them away. They just don't want to waste the time and go to the extent of filling out these NDAs. But of course, that's not going to slow down or stop a buyer that is seriously interested in the business.
Gotcha. Very helpful. And do you ever require, say if you're selling a high price business, and you're concerned about confidentiality, do you ever ask potential buyers to like send you proof that they have enough money to buy the business in the first place?
Yeah, that's definitely a good idea too, especially if you are getting into some serious conversations with someone interested. It is a great idea to have that proof and request that they do send proof showing that they can come up with the money to purchase that business, or at least have somewhere in the ballpark to the point where they can come in and make a serious offer for that business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we've, seen in our experience is that any legitimate buyer who is serious about, buying the business or taking a deeper look is usually not afraid to provide some level or detail of proof around their financial capacity to buy it. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on to number 4 on our list of consideration, and that's valuation multiples. Overall, you're going to tend to see higher valuation multiples out of selling your business with a broker versus selling it on a marketplace. There's really a couple reasons for that. The first being that these brokers take a ton of pride in their reputation and they have a lot of trust with potential buyers. And that's because before a broker lists a business, they're going to do a ton of due diligence on the front end to make sure it's a legitimate business, to make sure it's making the amount of money that they say it's making, and that there really are no red flags. Because the last thing a broker wants is to sell a business that turns out to be a scam, or to represent a business and say it makes 100K per year, but it turns out it only makes 50K per year. And so they're typically more trusted listings. People are willing to pay more money because they trust the work that the broker has put into it on the front end. In addition to that, they have more access to high six-figure buyers. If you think about, $1 million business for sale on a marketplace, let's say you get 5,000 views on your marketplace listing. What are the odds, or how many of those 5,000 people that looked at it actually have $1 million that they're looking to invest in an online business? Probably not that many, whereas a broker is going to have a contact list of hundreds of people that do have 6-7 figures or more and are willing to put it to work today. And so you'll get more competition because they have more access to buyers, and also they're better negotiators. You're negotiating on your own if you're selling it on a marketplace by yourself. You have a broker on your side who understands what businesses sell for, understands common negotiation points, and does it on a daily basis. And so you can typically negotiate a higher transaction price. Next, number 5 is transaction fees. And this is the one point where marketplaces are maybe going to be a little bit better than brokerages if we look at this on a kind of sole basis. So typically with a marketplace, you're going to range anywhere from 5 to 12% in selling fees, depending on where you list it. And typically, you'll see that 12% kick in on deals that are smaller than 6 figures, or maybe in the low 6-figure price range. And you'll get closer to that 5% price range when your business eclipses the $1 million price point. If you think about brokerages, they tend to be anywhere from 3 to 5% higher than marketplaces, and they also usually have higher break points meaning for you to get a reduced fee, your business has to be bigger. So, for example, some of the big brokerages out there, I think about FE International and Empire Flippers. If you have a sub-$1 million business, you're paying 15% regardless. Whereas, if you use maybe a more boutique broker, you're going to see lower fees to an extent, and then also better break points. So, for example, if I think about SaleAway in our business, if you're under 250,000, you're probably in the 12 to 15%. If you're 250 to maybe 500 or 750, you're in the 10 to 12% range. And then once you eclipse $1 million, you're going to be in the 5 to 8% range. And so you're going to see better pricing with some of the more boutique shops compared to the big dog brokerages, just because they have a lot more kind of fixed running costs. But anyways, all in all, transaction fees are higher on a brokerage, and the reason that they're higher is because, as Trey mentioned earlier, a broker is going to spend 150 hours of their time to sell your business, and they're going to do all of the work. You're going to handle all of the communication, and so they're going to earn their fee, whereas a marketplace can't command such a high selling commission because they don't really do anything for you other than connect you with a buyer and seller. And so that's the reason it's higher. If you're extremely fee conscious, there's still a lot of other considerations to take into account, especially the valuation multiples, the fact that brokers get higher valuation multiples. A lot of time that alone covers any additional fees that you're going to be paying from using a broker versus a marketplace.
Thanks for touching on that there, Jake. And I understand the higher valuations with working with brokerages, but still at the end of the day, my business is worth like $100,000. So I'm planning on selling it. I don't want to pay a broker $15,000 or something. How can I avoid that and get around paying any fees at all?
Yeah, so we get that a lot of the time from sellers who are maybe not interested in paying a percentage of their sales. They just can't stomach giving up 10 to 15% of their sale price for a broker. And so people ask us all the time, hey, how can I sell my business without having to pay anything? And there's a couple of options. Ultimately, there's not really any ways to do it without spending just a little bit of money, unless you have a buddy or a friend or someone, have a connection that's interested in buying it. But there are some ways where you can sell it for a very low dollar amount or dollar cost for doing so. And that would be using platforms such as BizBuySell, BizQuest, or businessesforsale.com. So a lot of these places are marketplaces traditionally for more brick and mortar businesses where you pay a monthly, quarterly, or annual listing fee. I think it's somewhere in the ballpark of $50 to $100 per month. And then you can list it on there and have it listed for as long as it takes to sell the business. And then there is no kind of percentage of sale price fee that gets charged upon a sale. So it's not a bad option, but one of the things that I would say is these marketplaces are traditionally for brick and mortar businesses, and so there's not a lot of online buyers that are commonly searching through all of the listings on there. And you also have to delineate your listing by location or geography. And so, for example, we would have to list our business for sale and say it's a business in Houston, Texas, whereas it's completely relocatable and can be run somewhere else. And so a lot of times people are only going to find it if they're searching for businesses for sale in Houston, Texas. And so ultimately it's just not the best platform to find online business buyers. And, ultimately the other thing that I would say is a lot of times the selling fee, the percentage you pay using a broker really pays for itself, just because you'll typically get a higher valuation working with a broker because they have more kind of connections, more legitimate online business buyers, and so they can run a more competitive process. Whereas when you put it on one of these marketplaces, you're really just hoping that someone reaches out and makes an offer to you, and you're probably going to get one offer. You're not going to get competing offers, and so you're not going to be able to negotiate and get the best sale price for you. And so ultimately you can do it. We don't recommend it, but you can probably sell, your website or business on a site like that for $500 or $600, I would say.
Perfect. Thanks for touching on that there. And moving on to the next point, we're going to discuss here negotiation and due diligence. So this does kind of go hand in hand with the above point regarding time and effort required when you're looking to sell with a brokerage or on the marketplace. So there is actually a lot of work that comes after an offer is received. Brokers help facilitate these processes and the negotiation itself. Whereas otherwise, if you just listed it on the marketplace by yourself, then you're completely on your own. Another important thing to mention is that seller financing and earnouts are common structures buyers use to purchase a business, especially once you start talking about six-figure businesses and upwards of a $250,000 and more. There are, I shouldn't say totally limited, but there are fewer buyers out there that do have that kind of money, cash on hand to actually make that cash offer. So especially when you get to those valuations, you're going to start to see those seller financing and earnout type offers come up a lot more frequently. If you don't understand either of these, you could get taken advantage of and really end up with a bad deal that they pitch in a way that you think it sounds like a great deal on the surface, but it's really just not a great deal. So understanding those is important. And of course, working with a brokerage that does have knowledge and understanding background working on those transactions, definitely a huge advantage there.
And then really the last consideration that we want to give you for going for a broker or a marketplace is legal documentation and the transfer of assets. Transferring of assets can get a little tricky if you have non-transferable assets such as AdSense, Amazon FBA, eBay, etc. Really having a brokerage help you navigate those waters is very beneficial. For example, we had a business that was 99% eBay revenue. And eBay is a very difficult account to transfer. And so we would say on average, we spent probably 5 to 8 hours really figuring out the ins and outs of how to transfer that eBay account. And at the end of the day, we did successfully do it. And the customers, both the buyers and sellers, were happy. And now it is still a successful business and still churning out quite a bit of profit, and it is growing. So just on those transferring assets, we do specialize in that. So that is one reason why we would encourage you to come to a broker, just to really help you out in those murky water situations to assist with that. Also, a number of legal documents need to be drafted. So those LOIs, those purchase agreements that we talked about previously, those will have to be drafted whenever you are transferring the assets, transferring the business to a buyer. So we always recommend that you do have an attorney to review those documents, but brokers are typically able to provide guidance, draft documentation, etc., just to really assist you in that process.
And just to jump in there and provide a little bit of additional color, if you're selling your business for $20,000, the legal documents might not be extremely complicated. You can get away with a pretty simple kind of form purchase agreement, but a lot of times when you get up into the higher priced figures, talking six-figure plus businesses, legal documents become extremely important. There's a lot of additional provisions and protections that you're going to want to have in there as a seller so that the buyer isn't able to come back after you and claw back a percentage or a dollar amount of the purchase price because of X or Y that happened after he took over the business. And so ultimately you need someone on your side, whether it's a lawyer or a broker, preferably both, to be able to help you and make sure that what you're drafting is enforceable and protects you and protects the money that you're putting in your pocket. In addition to that, there are a lot more kind of complicated documents that come into play when we're talking about bigger businesses, especially nowadays with seller financing and earnouts becoming a lot more kind of common types of financing on these bigger transactions. It makes the whole process a bit more complicated. So you'll have to draft, either You'll have to have a legal draft of how does the earnout work, how is it paid, etc. And then with seller financing, it's, how am I getting paid on a monthly basis? What kind of guarantees do I have that the new buyer is going to continue to pay me? And so there's a lot of stuff to think about when you get to more complicated financing structures. And so just wanted to throw that out there and kind of hammer it into your head that legal documentation is an extremely important aspect of selling your business, since a lot of people think it's, hey, get an offer and then, I'm good to go. The money's in my pocket. We just want to make sure the money stays in your pocket. So
Sorry to interrupt here. I did just want to touch on one more thing regarding you. You kind of touched on legal documentation, making sure these are enforceable or legally binding documents. Another thing that we dealt with on one business that we'd been working with for a while, it was actually that business was based in Bulgaria. And so I just wanted to throw this out there as a further consideration when you are sometimes working on some of those international deals, coming up with these legal documents and making them legally binding. Within, say, you're based in the United States and the buyer or seller is based in Bulgaria, sometimes making those legal documents can be a bit more complicated. So that's just another thing I wanted to throw out there and as a consideration when you are working on any international deals like that.
So that wraps up our list of 7 considerations. I just wanted to touch on a couple other things before we wrap up here. Wanted to start with a list of places where you shouldn't sell your website. Places like eBay, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, Facebook groups, and online forums are all places where I would not recommend trying to sell your website. Reason being, people, investors, people that are looking to buy digital assets are not going to Craigslist, not going to eBay, Facebook Marketplace, etc. And so you can list your business on there and you can list it, completely free, but the chances that someone, actually interested and legitimate reaches out and makes you a good offer are extremely slim. And so by putting your business on marketplaces or, kind of ancillary for sale websites like that, all that does is subject your business to, additional eyes and additional scrutiny. And, someone on Facebook might see, oh, hey, this guy's making a lot of money doing this. Like, it sounds like a pretty easy business. I'll just try to replicate it. And so you're showing your business to a lot of people who you probably don't want to show it to. And so it just kind of opens up a door of, potential for your business being copied or, increasing competition in the marketplace. And so don't recommend ever posting your website on places like that because you're not going to get any serious buyers. And then just wanted to provide you guys with a list of marketplaces that we do recommend listing your business if you want to go the kind of for sale by owner route. Kind of most important one I would say is flippa.com. Flippa is kind of the original online business marketplace, and so they've been around for a long time. Very good marketplace, lots of online buyers that hang around there. Additionally, I mentioned these 2 earlier, BizBuySell and then BizQuest, and then businessesforsale.com is another one. These marketplaces aren't as good because they're mostly focused towards brick and mortar, but you will get some hits from time to time, and you could potentially find a buyer on there. Next, there's Exchange Marketplace. Exchange Marketplace is Shopify's kind of exclusive marketplace for Shopify only websites. So if you're running in Shopify e-commerce store, that's a good place to go to list it as well. So overall, handful of marketplaces that we would recommend. Just stay away from the ones that I mentioned previously.
All right, guys. Well, I think that just about wraps everything up for us here. We apologize. This was kind of a long-winded, long podcast here, but we do hope that we touched on this pretty in depth here and that you're now comfortable with making that decision on whether you want to work with a broker or list on the marketplace. So again, I just want to cover those 7 discussions we had. And those included, or 7, considerations to really take into account when selling your business and determining which marketplace or brokerage is better to work with. And so those 7 considerations, again, were size, time and effort required, the potential buyer base that you can tap into, valuation multiples, transaction fees, negotiations and due diligence, and finally legal documentation and transfer of assets. So again, I'll just kind of walk through these one by one here and just give a quick one-sentence summary of each. So size is one thing that you want to consider, whether to list on the marketplace or a brokerage. Again, most importantly there, we touched on businesses under $100,000. You may be best off just listing on the marketplace. Businesses over $100,000, we definitely recommend working with a brokerage. Time and effort required. Brokerages do take a lot of work off of your hands. As a seller, you will have to work with the brokerage up close and put a decent amount of time in with that brokerage initially. From there, they'll handle a lot of the rest of the process, taking a lot of the work and effort off of your hands. Then we've got the potential buyer base with brokerages tapping into typically bigger buyer bases that are qualified, have been vetted, and do have six figures typically to purchase those higher value businesses. Additionally, with valuation multiples, typically brokerages are able to get higher values. Finally, with transaction fees, while brokerages are a bit more expensive than a traditional marketplace, again, that's up to you to decide whether or not it is worth it, but brokerages do provide a lot of different benefits, and so occasionally or frequently those transaction fees, paying a little bit higher to work with a quality brokerage, is typically worth it. Then moving on to negotiations and due diligence here. Again, brokerages have a great understanding, have been through a lot of these transactions, know a lot of the different earn out, a lot of the different structures that may come through as offers. So definitely a lot of advantages to working with a broker there. And then finally, legal documentation, transfer of assets. Brokerages will help with all of that, the escrow process, getting everything transferred to the buyer, and really just ensuring that that is a smooth and successful transaction. So I think that about wraps it up there, unless I can't think of anything I have to add, and unless Jake or Trey, do you guys have any final thoughts?
No, I think you hit it right on the head there. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. This podcast is available on Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and we would really appreciate it if you like the podcast. Click that like button, subscribe button, or add our show to your favorites so you can be in the loop whenever we have more shows in the future. Roll the outro.